Hi guys, this is an honor once again. So we've got two heavy hitters here, Dean and Hubertus, who've done their miles across the Bitcoin ecosystem across the world over the years. I've seen Hubertus adopting Bitcoin years ago, listening to him talk about Bitcredit, and I'm really admired with the persistence of the belief in that the world needs this product for Bitcoin to be used as a primary form of money. I'm going to let Hubertus introduce what his product is right now, Bitcredit, and why this is so important in this world. And Dean, well, I just got to meet Dean this year, and I was very skeptical straight away, not going to lie. And the more I learned about Dean and what he's been building for years, the more my mind was blown, and the more I started to realize how necessary it is to start building infrastructure, financial products on top of Bitcoin so that we can function as human beings. The stock market, the credit markets, every single market that we see have gained complexity, but they've been built upon the dollar, which is decomposing away. So we need to make an effort here on Bitcoin to start and think through things and start to develop different types of financial infrastructure that smoothens the process of transacting, of saving, of being able to exchange goods and services, of reducing risk, which we're going to talk about in today's panel. So Hubertus, can you please give us a bit of an introduction onto Bitcredit? Not too long, just give us a quick introduction and we'll go through a few questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris, for this Charlie, for this kind introduction. I guess to start off, I think we all have our opinions, what is needed so that Bitcoin, so that it can fix the world. And it's all rooted in what we know. And two very important elements come together here in Berlin, which is why I'm so happy to be here. They are the people who had the energy to build up the local circular economy. Of course, Charlie, Jethro, all the others here of the team. And then we have people like Harry, who just talked, and Cherito, who are also very crucial because they already try to put Bitcoin in the production and supply chain, which is where Bitcoin currently stops. Now my background as an Austrian economist from Austria, so I do the Hayek, but that background is combined with that I started out as a kid in Eurodollar banking with Citibank in places all over the world, and with the fact that not only I studied economics but also IT, which makes me kind of so with this unique combination, my explanation why something is missing in Bitcoin led to starting essentially the Bitcredit protocol really starting the end of 2022, so it's not been that long, but it's a huge project to build because we need to build three things for Bitcoin to work in the real economy. It starts with something called an electronic bill of exchange on Bitcoin rails, which is, you need to understand that trade normally doesn't run on money. I mean, Harry is in a fantastic situation, probably he's got enough Bitcoin to make it work, but normally it does not run on money because businesses, if they don't have credit, they lock up all their capacity in goods for sale and in receivables. And if you have those two things, you shouldn't really be locked in your growth. So there's this bills of exchange system which is now ready, and it's free, open source, anybody can access it. It sits right now on testnet, so the URL is testnet.minibill.tech, T-E-C-H. So that's the first element. The second element, and it targets B2B businesses like the coffee farmers, and I hope that we can get a coffee-based global circular economy starting from here. The next thing which is needed is something called Bitcoin credit mints. We call them wildcats. And what the wildcats do essentially is they take this peer-to-peer credit created between business against proof of work, which is the goods they have, and they fragmentize it into Satoshi-sized pieces. And they represent it in a new form of non-custodial eCash, Bitcredit eCash, which joins the other two eCash types in Bitcoin, with which you can essentially use the third application, which is a Lightning-style wallet with which you can pay with eCash. Now, eCash is kind of a fantastic thing. You can transact pretty much without scaling problems. It's totally private, it has no fees, and it's, so to say, paid within, let's say, 150, 200 milliseconds in vicinity and no more than 400 international. So that's the three elements of Bitcredit protocol, and we're pretty close to completion that system so that Bitcoin can go into the next level of adoption with businesses.
Okay, well, I want to go a little bit more in depth as to what the problem is. What the problem is with not having bills of sale in circulation so that people can really feel the need of a bill of sale, an electronic. We'll cross that now after introducing Dean. Just a very interesting point. Both Dean and Hubertus have set up in banks before in their life, one in Austria and one in Germany. So the guys have been heavily involved in investment banking throughout their life, and now somehow have found themselves in Berlin, in El Salvador, talking about how the world is going to be taken over from Bitcoin. So I want to, it comes from all angles, not just the people who are accepting Bitcoin on the merchant side, but people who have been in the traditional financial industry and want to be able to develop products on that. Dean, please, can you highlight the big problem that exists now that Tontines sets to solve, and give us a bit of background as to the problems in the insurance industry and the problems with people growing older and not have enough money to keeping them going.
Thanks, Charlie. If I can just start off by saying, first of all, I'm sure we both refer to ourselves as reformed investment bankers rather than ex-investment bankers. Just a word on Charlie. I got to know Charlie properly only over the last couple of months. I've been in Bitcoin technically since 2011. This guy forced me onto the Bitcoin standard over the last couple of months. And quite frankly, it's so much easier. I wish I had done it earlier. It's just giving the kids money, letting them go spend it, and everything else is so much easier to run on. In respect of Hubertus, I came to adopting Bitcoin last year, and I was blown away by the quality. I think you were involved in organizing that. But I've been saying for years one of the biggest opportunities for Bitcoin is trade finance. And I heard Hubertus talk, and I thought, oh my God, someone's actually doing it from an actually source code level, how to fix this industry. So I'm really excited on what he's working on, and certainly I want to understand it better. In terms of what I'm working on, initially I got exposed to Bitcoin in 2011. The first transaction I was focused on was trying to buy empty GOX, and I realized it's just too early. We can't do stuff like this. 6 or 7 years later, I find myself solving this problem for my mother and her friends in the golf club. They've all retired to Spain. They've got a certain amount of money set aside, but they don't know how long they're going to live. So if you don't know how long you're going to live, you don't know how quickly or slowly you can spend your money to avoid running out of money in old age. And the more I understood this from my mother, and she said every member of the golf club talks about it all day. Should we spend our money or should we save and reduce our lifestyle just in case we live a little bit longer? And I thought, this is terrible. They're all stressing about money every day. They're not enjoying their retirements. So because I've got a background in investment banking, because I've structured insurance companies, reinsurance companies, I go looking at this thing called an annuity, which is a financial instrument issued by insurance companies that pays you a fixed income for the rest of your life.
Like a pension.
Yeah. Essentially how most pensions work. So I'm reading all the documents for these annuities, and I'm thinking, this is absolute bullshit. There's no way I'm going to put my mother or her friends into these products because there's so many fees and so many caveats put into these products. I just don't know what they are.
As well as an exponentially increasing inflation rate due to the level of debasement that occurs, right?
Yeah, so the whole insurance industry sells these products, and the pensions industry, based upon the fact that it doesn't matter how much money you've got, you put it in, we'll give you a fixed income for life. They completely ignore inflation. So essentially, once you've locked yourself into that product, you're guaranteed that your quality of life is just going to go down and down over the years. And that's why, as it is the most hated financial product in the world, because everybody realizes that once they buy it, they're locked into an ever-decreasing lifestyle.
Cool, cool. So there's a serious problem. The problem being that people are stressed out about running out of money as they grow old and starting to rely on their kids or on the state in order to sustain themselves, which only causes problems and causes people's life quality to decrease. Okay? So then you came upon the...
Yeah, so in 2017, I started reading these papers that everybody had written about something called the Tontine. And I thought, what the hell is this? So the more I read about it, the more I'm thinking, actually, this is incredible. It's a very natural type of pension. And if everybody got one of these, they'd end up getting, they'd no longer have to stress about running out of money. They'd actually be able, mathematically, we've worked out, to double their spending every month in old age, and they'd never run out of money, even if they lived to age 120. So I started contacting everybody around the world that had spoken about them and said, is there an example live? And all they kept telling me is, well, we haven't solved this problem or that problem or that problem. And I realized that I knew the answers to all these problems. And one of the experts said, oh, you should patent that. So I did. And here we are 7 or 8 years later. The OECD has said that tontines are so much better for governments and for retirees that they should be made mandatory by default in the 38 of the most developed countries in the world. In August this year, Trump passed an executive order stating that every American should have access to tontines for retirement.
Yeah, so just to explain tontine, as how it works is, do you mind, Dean? You go into a member pool and go ahead.
So I think just for the sake of brevity to be able to explain it, if we can imagine everybody in this room, let's say we've got about 50 people. Imagine for a moment that we're all the same age, and imagine for a moment that women don't outlive men, which they do. We all stick a Bitcoin into a trust in your name, but the agreement we have between us is that if we're dead, we don't need the money. So now we start receiving a monthly income for the rest of our life, paid in Bitcoin, and the idea is that as inevitably some of us are going to pass away, whatever's left over in their account gets shared with everybody else. So we're constantly, every month or every year, redistributing some of the Bitcoin that people no longer need to top up the remaining accounts of everybody else. And this mechanism we've mathematically more or less perfected, that it will guarantee you an income over time, even if you live to age 120. And most significantly, the income rises over time and therefore protects you against inflation.
Yeah, so I'll go over to Hubertus. I think these products are really interesting. I want to dive in a little bit deeper. But Hubertus, this is on the mechanics of the e-bill and minting, okay? So in simple terms, when a supplier issues an e-bill to a buyer, okay, in Bitcredit Core, what exactly is being created, who is taking the risk at each step, and where does Bitcoin enter and leave the picture?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Charlie. I guess this is something which existed for about 500 years and actually ran the economy ever since the Italian bankers in 1500 during the so-called gold bullion famine, when Europe fell short of gold, restarted the European economy during the first stage of industrialization with windmills and watermills. So how did the Italian bankers rediscover this instrument? Essentially, we're talking about peer-to-peer credit, which is only created for production. That's exceedingly important in many aspects. First of all, the fiat system does not only create credit for production, which is a huge growth factor. No, it also creates credit for consumption, for speculation, and particularly for government consumption. Cantillon effect. Pretty much all Bitcoiners I know that. So that's a very bad thing because you get very bad growth and it holds back countries. The other thing is, Dean and I, we both been bankers, and at the same time, once I started to get deeper into Austrian economics, I concluded that banks should not create money. The central bank should not create money. Commercial banks should not create money. Mortgage banks should not create money. And yet it's so easy for them to create book money out of thin air. Now, Bitcoiners have the power to prevent that, because if we keep our Bitcoin strictly only self-custodial, or only non-custodial, but never ever custodial, then we can prevent this. So I urge anyone who uses a custodial wallet right now, stop using that shit. Excuse my French. Yeah,
Just to...
But on the mechanics, Charlie, I'll get to it. So what's happening is Bitcoin right now is not able to be adopted in trade and industry because you can get credit, fiat credit, shitty credit, only from the fiat system. We have not yet a protocol which is verifiably only done after proof of work in the real economy. When the real economy has produced something, when we have produced something, when Harry or Cherito have produced coffee, when the guys in Guatemala have produced cocoa, and they're stuck in the fiat system over there because the presumption in the banking system is that all of Guatemalans took drug money. Yeah, they're being cancelled for that in the fiat system. And there's actually $2.5 trillion in world trade of the poorest countries, which are blocked and keeping those countries poor because the fiat system blocks it. With Bitcoin, we can unblock it because merchants can issue bills of exchange to each other, peer-to-peer, direct. And your question was?
So let's use an example. Harry produces coffee, and he wants to send the coffee to Northern Ireland. Instead of the buyer in Northern Ireland sending Harry sats, Harry produces an e-bill and sends it over to the man in Northern Ireland. Who holds the risks? What are the consequences of this? What exactly is he issuing? And who has governance over what he is issuing?
Yeah. Okay, so he is issuing a so-called bill of exchange, which is in all the major countries in the world. And I hear from the parliament here that also El Salvador is jumping on the international standard for this. So El Salvador will very soon also have this bill of exchange law, which is pretty much unified all over the world, which is the only thing you need for this system to work. You don't need any financial laws, any special banking laws, heaven forbid. So this will be perfectly legal even here. Right now there's some differences. So yes, so Harry sells to somebody else, for instance, a coffee chain, which says, okay, in order to do that, I first need to roast the coffee, I need to ship it out into my coffee restaurant chains, coffee shop chains, and then some people need to buy it. So what's happening is they will say, okay, in order to make trade flow, I need 30, 60, or 90 days trade credit, which is a very normal thing in the fiat system. But currently, companies have gotten addicted to taking that credit from banks. And remember, banks should never create money. What happened before fiat times was there were so-called discount houses. Discount houses took in those bills of exchange and gave liquidity to the merchants. So they could pay their workers, pay their rent, pay their expenses, and stay liquid. Because Bitcoin does solvency. Bitcredit does liquidity. Liquidity keeps trade flowing. So on the risk, that's the other great thing. The fiat system is an accident waiting to happen. One bank, not even a big bank, triggers fears that the whole system falls down, which is why in 2022 there was the bailout of Silicon Valley Bank, which shouldn't have happened, yeah? But it's necessary in this corrupt, centralized fiat system because everything can topple. Bills of exchange are totally anti-fragile. It gets passed around from merchant to merchant. In the old days, sometimes 28 times during this average 60 to 90 days which they live. And merchants pay each other like that to keep trade flowing. And every endorsement, as it's called, endorsement, the prior holder is liable to the next holder in case the payer doesn't pay. And in addition, nowadays, in modern world, we also have credit insurance, credit default insurance to be.
Okay.
It's a specialized type of insurance by which you can insure that if the payer doesn't pay. So you have lots of possibilities to make this anti-fragile, very different to the fiat system.
Okay, so we're transitioning. So you're saying people use traditional credit from banks who would have held the risk of that individual not being able to pay back from the sales of that coffee in Northern Ireland. He doesn't make the revenue. He can't pay the bank. The bank suffers from the risk. So you're saying the risk shifts from the bank to then shifts to Harry. So Harry is now taking on the risk, and you're saying that he might mitigate that risk through this insurance that would be credit insurance.
It's very usual, yeah. It
Okay,
exists.
sorry.
This already exists. Credit
Exists.
default insurance
So,
is a huge
but so
business
you're
venture.
essentially shifting from the bank to the insurance company.
For instance, yeah.
Okay.
Of course, for a fee, but I mean that's we're all free markets guys. So if something doesn't make profit, it's probably not very legit.
But
So the
fundamentally, Hubertus, if you trade with a trusted network, then you don't need to worry about counterparty risk. If you're trading with people that you have very established relationships with, then instead of having the bank there to provide a blanket coverage or insurance, you're essentially doing the insurance on a peer-to-peer basis.
Yeah, Dean, you're absolutely correct on that. So what we observed in the old days when this still existed in its honest form, it was actually the honor of the trades of the merchant. So even if a bill wasn't paid, it wasn't called unpaid, it was called dishonored. And it was a terrible thing because people got essentially ostracized by the other business people. So the actual risk of the bill of exchange, and I've looked it up in the archives of London Metropolitan Archive from 1800 onwards, was minimal. We're talking anywhere between 0.5 to 0.1% default losses only, which is essentially sovereign grade.
Wow.
Even better than government
Wow.
sometimes.
So that's based on the trust that the producer has on the merchant of being able to sell because they have past experience of having generated that
it's
revenue.
less trust, Charlie. It's the economy. It economizes knowledge, like in the Hayekian sense. Because if I deal with Harry, I first want to know Harry. What does his farm look like? Is he producing? Is he an honest guy? So it's really a chain of knowledge which minimizes trust.
Gotcha. Brilliant. That's what we want. This is what we need. Okay, tontines now. So, what are tontines? Okay, so tontines in a Bitcoin standard world. In a future where Bitcoin is the primary savings asset, why would someone choose to lock capital into a tontine trust instead of just holding Bitcoin and self-managing their own withdrawals? What specific risks or problems does a tontine solve than just hodling Bitcoin?
So, with respect to Hubertus about, never, not your keys, not your coins, one of the problems, one of the downsides with this is that, as we know, the US government has in the past passed laws where they would seize your gold. It would be criminalized not to hand over your gold to the government. It's not impossible that this can happen with Bitcoin in the future. America's talking about it wants a 1 million Bitcoin strategic reserve. I'm not sure how they can do that without forcing people to hand over their keys.
But it's hard. Yeah. It's hard to make someone hand over your keys if you don't know they have Bitcoin, right?
And eCash, by the way, is totally private and uncensorable.
Yeah.
Already Cashew and Fedimint, but they are still custodial and federated. So they have some good use cases like for private money and for community money. But now we also need a general purpose currency. Yeah.
But so how we're solving the problem at the moment is that when you open a Tontine Trust, what we're doing is we're creating an individual, irrevocable trust for you in the best trust jurisdiction in the world, which is the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands, the beauty of it is that if any creditors try to come after you, they cannot penetrate the trust. The trust only belongs to you and can only pay income to you for the rest of your life. So we are a Swedish regulated trust company. Anytime you open an account with us, we will open a trust in the Cayman Islands that will hold your Bitcoin and pay you a monthly income for the rest of your life. One thing I want to do is if we can talk about the micro pensions.
Yeah, go ahead. We've got 4 minutes left.
So while the focus of our business predominantly is on attacking what is approximately a $700 billion per year opportunity in the US and similar sized opportunities around the world, what I've been discussing with Charlie over the last few weeks is that we have developed these techniques, and what we want to do is we want to encourage the development of what we call micro pensions. So we want to get people saving now. So to give you a quick example, since we're limited for time, if there's millions of people in El Salvador that don't have pensions, and the government can't just afford to just blanket give everybody a pension. But the idea now is that if you're 35 years old and looking to retire at 60, every dollar that you put into a tontine now is likely to pay you $10 per month in income when you reach 60 years old. So there's huge value in this. But the trick is we need to find ways to get people to save into these micro pensions. And I think one really simple use case, because if people are living on subsistent levels, they cannot just keep putting $10, $20, $50 a month into their pension. But if we look like one of our sponsors today, BitTasker, John, what's the average size that you expect of the transactions on your platform? So the answer I need, let's say it's $50 right now for every job. Maybe at some point in the new year, you and I can sit down, because the idea is that if I get someone to do a task for me and I'm paying $50 in sats, of course, if I'm paying them that, if they've done a really good job, I want to give them a tip. But the question is, what is better? Give them a $20 tip now that they'll probably go and spend, or can I just tip it into their tontine pension? And that will end up, if it's $20, it basically equates to $200 a month in 25 years' time for the rest of their lives. And quite frankly, I think it would be better to be tipping into their pension rather than anything else.
I think anybody who's interested in learning a bit more about either Bitcredit or Tontines, these are really, really exciting financial infrastructure products that will work on a Bitcoin standard and will be moving on. So please approach them. They're open. Guys, thank you for your time and for your great knowledge. It's a real pleasure. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Charlie.
Amazing. Picture. Amazing. I got to admit, a little of that went over my head, but I'm glad that people are thinking about this problem. I know when I first discovered how the fiat system worked, I liquidated all my retirement accounts, paid the penalty, and went into gold and silver because I realized just how evil the fiat system is, and that I probably wouldn't even recoup the value that I put into it. So glad these guys are thinking about it. Thank you, gentlemen. I want to introduce